For 70 years, it was UFO. Then, almost overnight, it wasn't. Suddenly, it was UAP. Now, the official explanation is simple. The old term carried with it stigma. Pilots hesitated to report their encounters. Officials wanted a cleaner label. Now, that explanation is real, but it's not complete. Because when UFO became UAP, more than a word changed. The search terms changed. The agencies with jurisdiction to investigate changed. The reporting channels changed. And the oversight pathway changed. By the end of this episode, I want to show you 4 concrete things that changed when UFO became UAP, and why the shift looks less like a cosmetic rebrand and more like a purposeful structural reset. The government didn't just change a word, it changed the oversight structure around the word. The rebrand was structural, and it wasn't the first time they'd done it.
This is Beyond the Map.
Welcome to Beyond the Map. I'm Buddy T. Let's start with the official explanation, because part of it holds up. For decades, the word UFO was culturally toxic inside of military aviation circles. Pilots who reported encounters with UFOs risked their careers. Commanders who took reports seriously risked their credibility. The stigma was operationally costly. In 2023, former Navy pilot Ryan Graves told Congress the stigma attached to UAP reporting is real. It discourages witnesses, especially commercial pilots, from coming forward. And when institutions then question the same witnesses' credibility, it compounds the problem. So yes, replacing UFO with UAP did something useful. It created a cleaner, more operational term. It signaled the subject could be discussed without dragging in decades of pop culture baggage. And that part makes sense. The explanation accounts for stigma. It does not account for structure. A cosmetic change doesn't require new reporting structures, new legal language, new offices, new classification pathways, or a rebuilt oversight framework. You don't need all of that to change the label. You need all of that to change the framework. And that is the gap that this episode is about. And to see it clearly, we have to go back before the public even knew the programs existed. Every UAP case has layers: sightings, witnesses, records, and institutional response. This episode is about that last layer. Walk the timeline and pay attention to 2 things: the names and what survives the name changes. 2007, AAWSAP, the program nobody knew about. Congress directs $22 million into a classified DIA contract called AAWSAP, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program. The contract goes to Bigelow Aerospace. The scope is broad. It's about advanced propulsion, physics anomalies, potential biological effects of UAP encounters. Publicly, none of this exists. 2012, AAWSAP ends. The name changes. AAWSAP's funding dries up. The Bigelow contract ends. The DIA closes the program. That part's relatively straightforward. What comes next is not. The broader effort doesn't carry the AAWSAP name forward. The label that dominates the later public story is AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Now that's the same name used in major press reporting. It's the name that Luis Elizondo used, and it's the name that senators used. But the formal status of AATIP after 2012 is one of the central disputes of this entire subject. Luis Elizondo says he continued a narrower version of the work from inside the Pentagon, focused on military UAP encounters. Unfunded, informal, but with Navy and CIA support through October of 2017. The Pentagon disputes that account and says no authorized AATIP program existed in that window. Enter Senator Harry Reid, one of the original backers of the early effort. He confirmed Elizondo's involvement and leadership role as a matter of record. The contract ended, the name changed. The continuity of mission became disputed. The official record stopped looking clean. The pattern matters because it appears again. 2017 exposure. On December 16, 2017, the New York Times, the existence of the program is confirmed. 3 Navy pilot encounter videos are released.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
Elizondo resigns from the Pentagon, citing excessive secrecy and internal opposition. In fact, he's excluded from reaching the top of the chain of command. The Pentagon's response: AATIP existed, but Elizondo had no responsibilities with regard to the program. So the program's confirmed, the director is denied. It's the same institution, the same press cycle, but this is not just a minor inconsistency. It's a documented institutional contradiction. 2019 to 2022, the new framework takes shape. UAPs become dominant in official language. By 2021, it's reinforced by the Directorate of National Intelligence's Preliminary Assessment Report. It's 9 pages, 144 incidents, 11 documented near misses, and the word UFO does not appear once. In 2020, UAP Task Force emerges, revealed by Congress, not announced by the Pentagon. 2022, AARO is established. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. It's permanent. It's statutory. The definition expands to any anomalous phenomenon across all domains: air, water, space, and objects that transition between them. From AAWSAP to AATIP, from UFO to UAP, from UAP Task Force to AARO. With each transition, a new name, a restructured framework, continuity questions, a contested official record. The government has executed this shape repeatedly inside the same institutional history we're examining. The timeline is documented. Now let's separate what the record actually shows from what's still contested, and let's identify some of the gaps that don't close. Here's the core of the claim of this episode. If UFO became UAP in a way that changed structure, we should be able to point to specific consequences. Not vibes, not tone, specific, documentable consequences. And I think there are 4. One is discoverability. For decades, researchers, journalists, and FOIA filers searched under the term UFO. That term's attached to enormous amounts of historical material. They all contain the search term UFO. When UAP becomes the official term, a practical problem appears. Databases and Freedom of Information Act requests don't automatically collapse those terms into one another. A search for UAP records does not necessarily return legacy UFO records. It's the same broad subject, 2 separate retrieval paths. Now that matters more than just the convenience. If the historical record sits under one term and the modern record sits under another, continuity becomes harder to demonstrate. Researchers have to know which language to use, when the language changed, and how to file accordingly. Most don't. Language determines discoverability. When you change the official term, you change what the public can find and how easily the record can be read as one continuous history. 2, jurisdiction. Under the older UFO history, the Air Force owned most of the institutional memory. Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, 40 years of Air Force administered investigation. But under the new UAP framework, the center of gravity shifts. The Defense Intelligence Agency involvement, then Navy-led activity, and then AARO under the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. Each transition brought new classification systems, new compartmentalization rules, and new standards for what reaches congressional oversight committees. The Air Force legacy UFO files are largely declassified and accessible through the National Archives. AARO's current UAP files operate under an entirely different framework. When jurisdiction changes, so does the classification environment, the routing chain, and who decides what gets elevated and what stays compartmentalized. Now, that's not speculation, that's just how bureaucracy works. 3. Oversight. Budgets are not just money. They are categories, authorities, and committees. When a subject is rebuilt under new terminology and the new organizational home, oversight doesn't necessarily automatically follow the old trail. A classified appropriation labeled UAP and one labeled UFO do not automatically trigger each other's oversight review because they carry a different categorical label. The historical UFO file in a declassified archive, well, it's not the same thing as active UAP program under AARO's jurisdiction. At minimum, the change affects what outsiders can easily see and how lawmakers have to pursue the subject. Names in bureaucracies are indexing systems. They shape the routing, the searchability, and which oversight mechanism activate. Bureaucratic changes are often where control actually lives. 4. Reporting. This is the point official defenders of the new framework emphasize most, and rightly so. The newer UAP architecture created more formal reporting pathways. The 2021 D&I report acknowledged underreporting is a serious problem. Building a formal channel for military personnel and other witnesses to report without risking their careers is a genuine improvement. But here's the paradox. A better reporting pipeline can also become a tighter control pipeline. More reports can enter the system while fewer people outside the system evaluate what happens next. The same reform can reduce stigma and centralize handling simultaneously. So if you're following, there's more reports entering the system. There's less of the system visible from the outside. That is structural paradox. And the next act, I'll show you what it looks like in practice. So let's compare the official mandate against the paper trail. What does AARO's own conduct look like when you run testimony against the documented record? On paper, AARO was supposed to be more than a new office with a new acronym. Congress gave it a specific job: receive sensitive reporting from current and former government personnel at any classification level, regardless of their NDA obligation, investigate it, and produce a historical accounting robust enough to address long-running allegations of concealment, misinformation, and hidden program activity. Now that's the design. Now compare it to the public record.
Move on to Mr. Borland's opening statements.
Good morning, members of the task force and the committee. I would like to express my gratitude for being invited to testify to the current task force created under the People's Chamber and the American public. As an American citizen, veteran, and intelligence community professional, it is an honor and a privilege to serve under oath before you on behalf of our country. I speak for myself and no former agency or company I have been previously affiliated with.
Dylan Borland is a former U.S. Air Force geospatial intelligence specialist. He's on active duty from 2010 to 2013, and later a senior analyst at BAE Systems and Intrepid Solutions. He has documented clearances and professional experiences analyzing video, radar, and advanced electro-optical imagery. He had the background to know what he was looking at and the credentials to be taken seriously. In March of 2023, Borland went to AARO, the legally designated channel for his intake interview. Before Congress on September 9th, Borland described what happened.
I'm a federal whistleblower, having testified to both the ICIG and AARO with direct firsthand knowledge of and experience with craft and technologies that are not ours and are reportedly operating without congressional oversight. Because of my direct knowledge of the reality of certain legacy UAP programs, my professional career was deliberately obstructed, and I have endured sustained reprisals from government agencies for over a decade. From 2011 to 2013, I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, conducting 24-hour operations via manned and unmanned aerial vehicles for Special Operations Forces in the global war on terror. During the summer of 2012, my team was on standby for weather, and I returned to my barracks on base, and at approximately 01:30, I saw an approximately 100-foot equilateral triangle take off from near the NASA hangar on the base. The craft interfered with my telephone, did not have any sound, and the material it was made of appeared fluid or dynamic. I was under this triangular craft for a few minutes, and then it rapidly ascended to commercial jet level in seconds, displaying zero kinetic disturbance, sound, or wind displacement. Some years after that experience, I was further exposed to classified information from the UAP legacy crash retrieval program through a sensitive position I held within a special access program. During this time, intelligence officers approached me in fear for their own careers, citing misconduct within these programs and similar retaliation that I was already enduring at this time. These issues include medical malpractice committed by Veterans Affairs staff, denial of work I performed while enlisted in the United States Air Force, forged and manipulated employment documents, workplace harassment, including colleagues being directed to not speak with me, manipulation of my security clearance by certain agencies, blocking, delaying, and ultimately removing my ability to be employed within the IC. The retaliation I face and the retaliation against individuals I know who worked in these programs is what convinced me in March 2023 to become a whistleblower. I came forward out of concern for people's lives and to ensure I did everything I could to let our elected representatives know the truth about what is really happening in the executive branch. At the end of March 2023, I agreed to meet with AARO following the suggestion of other federal officials believing it was what our nation required of me. I had reservations with AARO due to assessments they were reporting publicly at the time as a misrepresentation of the truth. Because of these concerns, I did not share sources and methods information in order to protect current and former federal personnel who had firsthand exposure to technologies of unknown origin. I did not want anyone to face further retaliation beyond what they had already endured. And unfortunately, a staff member ended up getting in some trouble because of that. After David Grusch testified under oath in the summer of 2023 and provided historic disclosure, I was then asked to go to the ICIG and did so in August 2023. It was very clear early on during my intake interview, which was video recorded under oath, that the objective was to solely assess how much I know and not move forward with an investigation with new information I provided them. The aftermath of that IG complaint still troubles me to this day. Since my ICIG complaint, I've been prevented from resuming prior employment and can confirm I'm still blacklisted from certain agencies within the intelligence community. In addition, multiple agencies attempted phishing attacks to assess what I had divulged to the Inspector General, including being asked to disclose details of my ICIG complaint during a CI polygraph for a position unrelated to UFO UAP matters as recently as November 2024.
From his first session at AARO, it was clear to him that the objective was to assess how much he knew, not investigate what he was reporting. The staff, he noted, appeared to be good people doing what they were told. He didn't meet with Sean Kirkpatrick, then AARO's director. Kirkpatrick was either not present that day or chose not to meet with him. And after his submission, AARO classified information about the subject matter. Not Borland's identity, but the content of what he had just brought in. In August of 2023, Borland filed a complaint with the intelligence community's Inspector General. The aftermath, in his words, before Congress, he was blacklisted from agencies within the intelligence community. Multiple agencies subsequently conducted what he described as attempts to determine exactly what he had disclosed to the Inspector General. That included that during a polygraph for a position entirely unrelated to UAP matters as recently as November 2024. His closing statement to the House Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets.
As I sit before you today, I and many other whistleblowers have no job prospects, no foreseeable professional future, and a nation every single one of us came forward to defend. Numerous individuals have come forward in various ways to reveal the truth of the UAP reality as patriots and defenders of our nation. Yet many feel discarded, isolated, hopeless, separated from the country they serve.
He and other whistleblowers have no job prospects and no foreseeable professional future. Representative Anna Paulina Luda, the task force chairwoman, apologized to him on the record and pledged to try to rectify the situation. That sequence does not by itself prove a broader hidden program. But if testimony is accurate and it was delivered under oath before Congress, it raises a serious and specific question. What does transparency look like when the designated reporting channel can also become the place where the information is further contained? The March 2024 Historical Report. AARO's Historical Report, the one Congress specifically mandated to address long-running allegations of concealment and misinformation, it was released in March of 2024. It was the first AARO report submitted to Congress without sign-off of the Director of National Intelligence. The intelligence community's own senior oversight official declined to sign it before it went into Congress. He would not endorse the report. Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and one of the architects of the 2017 disclosure effort, reviewed it publicly in the debrief. He said it's perhaps the worst government report that he could recall reading in decades of government service. He documented that it omitted entire agencies with known UAP investigations, and it failed to address the concealment mandate that Congress had written into law. And it excluded outside expert input, contrary to standard practice for reports of this nature. In January 2024, House members received a classified briefing from the Intelligence Community Inspector General Thomas Monheim on UAP reporting transparency. Members came out of that hearing frustrated, with no clear answers on whether activity had been hidden from Congress. Now, put those pieces together carefully. A designated reporting channel is created. A credentialed witness says using it harmed him. A historical report arrives and it's widely criticized for not resolving the concealment issue it was mandated to address. And lawmakers still signal frustration on the oversight question. Now, none of this proves a cover-up, but it does support a narrower conclusion. A centralized transparency mechanism can also function as a centralized point of management, especially when the outside world has limited access to the underlying record. This is not an abstract risk of centralization. It is the documented result of it. Now, step back from AARO and look at the broader institutional pattern, because this tension didn't begin with AARO. It was already there, and it predates AARO by more than a decade. Case 1, the Elizondo contradiction. We established earlier that the 2012 to 2017 gap in the public record is unresolved. Here's the specific contradictions at its center. In 2017, Pentagon spokeswoman Dana White confirmed to Politico that Elizondo had been the director of AATIP. In 2019, Pentagon spokesperson Christopher Sherwood told The Intercept that Elizondo had no responsibility related to AATIP at all. Now, that's the same institution, just 2 years apart, with direct contradiction. It's never been corrected. In 2021, Senator Harry Reid publicly affirmed Lou Elizondo's role as a matter of record. He wrote a letter to NBC News. The record cannot be concealed cleanly from official statements alone. And that matters because this isn't a minor side issue. The continuity question sits right at the center of this transition from the older framework to the newer one. The program's own congressional sponsor and two different Pentagon spokespeople cannot all be correct. The institution has never reconciled the record. That is the documented state of the official history of AATIP. Case 2, the Grusch testimony, July 26, 2023. Former Air Force intelligence officer David Grusch testified before the House Oversight Committee under oath. 14 years of intelligence experience. He served as his agency's co-lead on UAP and transmedium object analysis, reporting to the UAP Task Force and to AARO. He filed his complaint through the intelligence community's Inspector General, the proper legal channel. He told Congress he had been informed in the course of his official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. He was denied access when he requested entry. His testimony was based on accounts of over 40 individuals with verified service records. He said the program had been shielded from congressional oversight through misappropriated funds. When asked if people had been harmed to protect this information, he said yes. What senators said? Senator Marco Rubio, the vice chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and now the Secretary of State, he said witnesses come forward to his committee with firsthand knowledge. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, she intended to investigate whether rogue special access programs existed with no congressional oversight. That language, rogue special access programs, this is a United States senator speaking on the record. The Pentagon's formal response, no verifiable information to substantiate claims that any program regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial material has existed. Where the language diverged. When David Grusch testified, the most explosive headlines centered on crash retrieval and non-human implications. But institutionally, one of the most important parts of his testimony was different. He said he was told about activity hidden from congressional oversight and denied to him despite his role. Now, that's an oversight allegation. The Pentagon's response focused on the lack of verifiable evidence for programs involving extraterrestrial materials. That's a different question, related in public imagination, but not identical in bureaucratic terms. If a witness says there's activity being concealed from oversight, and the institution responds primarily that there's no evidence of extraterrestrial activity, the core oversight allegation has not been met. Now, it doesn't make this witness correct automatically. It does mean that the institutional response narrowed the frame, and the central question remains unresolved. Once you start watching for that pattern, extraordinary public claim, narrower official response, oversight question still open, you see it consistently across the record that we're building here. Let me narrow this down as carefully as I can. I'm not claiming in this episode that every extraordinary allegation is true. I'm not claiming that every person inside these institutions are acting in bad faith. And it's not claiming that the word change by itself proves a deliberate concealment strategy. What this episode does claim is smaller and more defensible. When UFO became UAP, the framework around the subject changed in 4 concrete ways. Discoverability changed, jurisdiction changed, oversight pathways changed, and reporting changed. Now, some of those changes were improvements. Less stigma, that's an improvement. A formal reporting pathway, that's an improvement. A more serious institutional tone is an improvement. But some of those changes also concentrated handling inside a newer, more centralized system, one that appears at minimum to have made continuity harder for the public to track and harder for Congress to verify from the outside. That's 4 structural changes. None of them were required to simply reduce stigma or update the label. And There's a fifth item, and it's not theoretical. AARO, office created to centralize UAP reporting and provide oversight accountability, was mandated by Congress to document any government efforts to conceal UAP information. The report produced didn't address that mandate. It was released without DNI sign-off. A former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Defense for the intelligence community called it the most inadequate government report that he had encountered in decades of service. And the whistleblower who used it, the designated reporting channel, testified under oath that using it cost him his career. The oversight mechanism produced a report that didn't fulfill its mandate. The reporting channel classified the information people brought to it, and that's the present tense version of the pattern this episode's been documenting. Now, add the pattern to the things that predate it. Before UFO became UAP, the government ran a program called AAWSAP. AAWSAP ended. Name changed to AATIP. By the account of the man who ran the program, the mission continued. By the account of one of AAWSAP's own congressional sponsor, Elizondo led the program. The Pentagon said no authorized program existed in that window. New name, disputed continuation, institutional contradiction, contested official record. And then AATIP became the UAP Task Force, which became AARO. The government didn't invent this pattern in 2020. This pattern already existed. It was already present inside the program history that we're examining. Whether that pattern is built to primarily improve reporting or to manage scrutiny or to do both at the same time, the public record is not clean enough to settle that fully. But it is strong enough to support this conclusion. The UFO to UAP shift is not merely cosmetic. It was clearly structural, and understanding that matters even if you remain completely agnostic about what UAP ultimately are. AAWSAP ended in 2012. The name changed. A man who ran the work says the mission didn't stop. The senator who funded it agrees. The Pentagon says otherwise. UFO disappeared from the official documentation. UAP took its place. A new institutional structure grew up around the word. The old records stayed under the old word. When a government changes a term formally, across agencies, in legislation, in its budget documents, in its classification systems, the question is not just what they're calling it now. The question is what the new name is carrying that the old name wasn't, and what it left behind. One last thread. When AATIP officially ended in 2012, internal DoD documents obtained through FOIA show that AATIP briefings being delivered to senior officials took place in 2017. Not archived briefings being reviewed, but active new briefings in 2017, 5 years after the program officially ended. The official record says AATIP ended in 2012. These documents suggest that that's not the complete picture, but that's the next episode. I hope you enjoyed our story tonight on Beyond the Map. If you liked it, please subscribe and hit the notification icon and share this episode and our channel with others. We've enjoyed having you on Beyond the Map. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.